What is the number one food that I tell all of my patients to stop eating? Well, stay tuned and I'll tell you what it is and why. Morning everyone, out for another run. I've got a middle distance triathlon in 2 weeks, so this is my last long run. But I thought I'd better film something because I've been a bit remiss on that front. But today, we're going to be talking about a particular thing which is in almost every single product you buy. It's very, very hard to get away from. And it's mainly there because it's cheap, it's subsidised, and as a result, the food industry have spent decades figuring out ways to use it. And as a result, it gets used more, it gets cheaper, and it's in more things. So what is that number one thing that I want people to stop eating? Well, believe it or not, it's refined wheat. Refined wheat is in absolutely everything. It's in your breakfast cereals, in your breads, your pastas, your baked goods, your gravies. It's absolutely everywhere. As I said, it's because it's cheap, but also it's because it acts as a binding agent and it holds a lot of things together. So it gets used to try and keep, to give things their form and their shape and their consistency. So it's very ubiquitous, very hard to get away from, but it causes lots of problems. Now, if you stay tuned to the end, I'll tell you what you can eat instead. So, what are those problems? Well, let me just tell you a story. I had a lady come to the practice with her kid, and her kid had really bad eczema. And she said, I've tried everything, I'm fed up, I don't want any more creams, what else you got? And I said, well, that's kind of the usual thing to give people with eczema. So why don't we try and do something a little bit different and cut wheat out your diet? Of course, it was at that moment that she looked at me like I had two heads. But she said, fair enough, I'll give it a shot. And I said, try it for 4 weeks, see how you get on. And if you're not getting anywhere, come back and I'll put in a dermatology referral, because that was the only other option. So she came back 4 weeks later, and interestingly, I had a medical student in the room with me, and she said, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? Okay. She said, my daughter's eczema's completely cleared up, and my other daughter's asthma has stopped bothering her, and my husband has stopped snoring, and I've lost 10 pounds. And I said, well, I do believe you. That's why I told you to stop it. And she walked out happy, and the medical student turned to me and said, oh my goodness, what did you give them? I said, I didn't give them anything. I told them to stop eating wheat because it's a known allergen and it causes all kinds of low-grade inflammation, and in some people that manifests as physical symptoms. So that's my N=1 case study. N=4, I suppose. But I've used that again and again and again, and I've seen asthma get better, I've seen eczema get better, I've seen irritable bowel syndrome get better, I've seen inflammatory joint disease get better. So anything that is caused by inflammation can be helped by reducing your body's total inflammatory load, and one of those things that causes inflammation is refined wheat. So let me give you 6 things that wheat does to us that's not very good. Now I should point out, I'm not talking about the wheat that your grandparents had. I'm talking about this bottom shelf, ultra refined white powder that's basically wheat flour. So the first reason to eat less wheat is that it's a very simple sugar, goes into your bloodstream very rapidly, and as a result of that, it causes your blood sugar to spike. And when your blood sugar spikes, what your body does is it tries to absorb that sugar with a hormone called insulin, and then the insulin spikes. And when insulin spikes, blood sugar drops, and you have this lag period where insulin is high, but sugar is now low or normal. And when that happens, you're much more prone to overeating because you still feel hungry. So reason number 1, insulin goes up as a result of a blood sugar spike, and that makes you hungry and you're more likely to overeat. Okay, the second reason, which is sort of on the back of that one, is that it doesn't keep you hungry because they've taken out all the fibre and all the protein, and so it doesn't keep you hungry, it doesn't keep you full. So that means you're more likely to overeat. And of course the result of overeating is weight gain, and absolutely everyone is worried about their weight, which is why they're all taking Manjaro and things like that. So if you don't want to gain weight, maybe consider how much wheat's in your diet and try and cut that out, because if you're eating lots of it, chances are it's going to put your weight up. As I said in the intro, it causes inflammation, and most chronic diseases have an element of chronic inflammation with them. So if you're worried about developing things like heart disease, strokes, even things like cancers, but more commonly things like type 2 diabetes, then have a think about your diet. Is it an inflammatory diet? Is it promoting those illnesses? And the answer is probably yes. So wheat is a simple thing you can remove that actually will reduce the level of inflammation in your body, and that might help. So if you're worried about chronic disease, or you already have a chronic disease, consider cutting wheat out of your diet. Okay, number 4, again, I think I mentioned this in the intro, is that in order to make a usable product very cheaply, the industry strips a lot of the nutrients out of the wheat grain. And this is kind of a hangover from the Second World War, when the countries in the West were worried about, I'm sure in the East as well, but they were worried about people not having enough nutrition, and by that what they actually meant was enough calories. So they decided to try and improve the production of certain things through government subsidies. This is particularly obvious in the 1930s in America, but also after the Second World War in the UK. And when they did that, it meant that these industries have tried to use these products for as many things as possible because they're the cheapest ingredient. A good example of that is high fructose corn syrup in America, which is a different kind of product, of course, and it's not wheat related, but it is a subsidized corn product, and that's really bad for your health. But where they strip those nutrients from the original grain, it means it's left with nothing. So they're very nutrient poor, or nutrient deplete, and therefore you have to get your nutrients elsewhere. And in order to get that, they'll market the hell out of those products, things like Weetabix and Shreddies, which they say are high in fibre. They're low in fibre in comparison to the original grain, but marketing says they're better than cornflakes or Frosties, so eat them instead. So be cautious when you see with added such and such on the packet. That usually means such and such was removed in the first place during the ultra processing mechanics of the food production, and they've had to add it back instead. Okay, next up is its link to type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. This one's kind of obvious. If you're eating loads of glucose in effect, or starch, very simple starch, it goes into your bloodstream really rapidly, and as a result of that your blood sugar spikes, and when that spikes you have to produce lots of insulin to counter that. And if that happens over and over again, you become what's called insulin resistant. Now, what is insulin resistance? Well, insulin resistance is where your body is producing quite a lot of insulin because of your diet, and there's 2 things in the diet involved with that. There's another video I made all about this, which I'll put here, you can have a look. But basically, if you've got a high animal saturate diet, your liver and your pancreas and your organs get lots of fat put through them, and they don't function that well. And when you have a high carbohydrate diet, and I mean simple carbohydrates or ultra processed or refined carbohydrates, they go into your bloodstream so quickly that your poor pancreas tries to produce enough insulin to bring that sugar spike down, but it's confounded by the fact that the liver, which is constantly dribbling out glucose, should actually switch off its glucose production, but it can't do it because it's become a bit simple with all the fat that it's got in its substance. And so you're not only getting sugar from your diet and what you've eaten, but you're getting it from the liver as well. And those two things combined over many months and years mean that your body doesn't respond to the insulin very easily because it's producing as much as it can, and the cells begin to ignore the effect of it. So the blood sugar stays in the bloodstream, and when it stays in the bloodstream for long enough, you begin to develop type 2 diabetes. So reason number 5 is that it promotes type 2 diabetes, and along with those other things that I've mentioned before, mean that wheat should be certainly something you consider excluding from your diet, particularly if you've had a diagnosis of pre-diabetes, because that's one of the things that might prevent you developing full-blown diabetes. The last thing, reason number 6, is that if you make something that's super cheap, it's got loads of calories, very easy to use, you're going to put it in everything. And as a result of that, wheat, refined wheat, is found in lots and lots of ultra-processed products. And ultra-processed products have lots of salt, lots of sugar, and lots of unhealthy fat. And those products are linked to so many problems from the point of view of your health. So if you cut wheat out of your diet, the chances are you're also going to cut out a lot of ultra-processed foods. So it's a simple way of eliminating those from your diet. If it's got wheat, don't eat. Well, that's a good one. I need to remember that. The first question everyone always asks me when I tell them about this is, well, what am I supposed to eat? Every time, if I had a penny for every time someone asks that, well, it's quite simple. Change the grain. And by that I mean use a different grain. So move to something like oats, have porridge instead of breakfast cereals, have oat cakes instead of toast. And the other thing you can use a lot of is things like rice, particularly brown rice. And you can also get other kinds of grains like quinoa, things like that. So substitute those in, have a lot more kind of rice-based meals, whole grain rice, instead of using things like pasta. Now you can get gluten-free foods, do not eat them. They are ultra-processed to hell, and also they basically taste terrible, so stay away from gluten-free bread, gluten-free pasta. The next thing people always complain about, of course, is bread, because it's everywhere. And I guarantee you, the bread on the supermarket shelf is not the bread your grandparents had. It's ultra-processed garbage. And when they say it's whole grain bread, or it's got seeds added, it's still the base element, still starchy wheat, and it's usually very bad for you. As an example, white bread has 5 sugar cubes worth of sugar in it, if you convert the glucose, and brown bread has 4, so it's still just pretty bad for you. So stay away from breads. And if you do have to have some bread, consider artisan breads that have been freshly baked. And in particular, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but sourdough bread is a bit better for you because it's been fermented, and some of the ingredients have been removed as a result of the fermentation process. And another option would be something like corn-based, like tortilla wraps, those kind of things. If you do feel you need to have some kind of sandwichy thing, use a corn wrap instead. I think you even get beetroot ones nowadays, so try those. And the last thing that might be quite helpful is base your meal around the protein. Make sure that you've got plenty of that in your, on your plate. And like I said when I was talking about the formation of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, maybe try and stay away from the animal saturates and move towards more things like nuts and beans and seeds, legumes, and more fruits and vegetables. Make those the mainstay of your plate. And if you do have to have some refined carbohydrates, have it with a high fibre meal, because the fibre will hold it in your guts for longer and prevent it from just going directly into your bloodstream. So there's a few pointers. I hope they're useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Nice.